Hi everyone, this is acyuta-bhava from Nightlight Astrology, and today I'm hanging out with my friend Kat from the Creative Introvert. We have been doing a few more videos lately, trying to help create some content when I'm in the process of moving and don't have the normal amount of time that I have to dedicate to making fresh videos. So you just get a big dose of Kat and I hanging out. But I'll be back to a more regular schedule of things in the next couple of weeks here when the moving craziness dies down for me. In the meantime, Kat's here today. We're hanging out. Love talking to Kat. So thanks for being here, Kat. Kat aggregates all of the questions that you guys put in the chat box in live streams and aggregates them and tries to create fun kind of little interviews that we can do together. So thanks for being here, Kat.
Yeah, you're welcome. And thanks everyone for putting up with me through this week. But yeah, hopefully I'll make it up with some good questions today. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is the idea of karma. So I've heard you describe our chart as like a karmic field.
Right.
Would that be true? And I guess one of the questions that, I've struggled with in my time learning about astrology is, how much of our chart is changeable karma and how much of it is set in stone? And, is there anything we can do, any special words we can say to burn up some of that karma?
Yeah, burning up karma, right. Yeah, that's a really good question, and a lot of people have it. In fact, I had someone ask me that question in a session this morning, and I said, I'm going to be recording something about this probably today. So, first of all, it's important to dispel a few rumors, myths, and untruths about karma in general, because, I have to kind of qualify this by saying that in the modern era of astrology, there have been a number of different traditions that claim to be, like, they'll call themselves karmic astrology or something like that. And a lot of the times these traditions, really, they're not rooted in the progenitors of karmic science from India. Meaning they're not rooted in the Upanishads and the Vedas. They're not rooted in the Vedanta Sutra or any of the traditional texts that teach us about the science of karma or its relationship to astrology. So the thing that's tricky is that a lot of people end up picking up these kind of new age modern inventions, which, I leave it to each person to kind of judge for themselves the truth value of these different kinds of practices or methods that claim to be karmic in nature. I personally am more interested, obviously because of my commitment to yoga, in the traditional ancient mystical view of karma. And so it's very different than the modern view. So for one thing, one of the things that we learn about karma from ancient sages and shastras is that karma is anadi. Anadi means without beginning. So, for example, the view of the universe is that it's not created, right? It doesn't have like a single origin point in time or something like that. It's thought of as an energy of God, or as like an emanation of God, and that has eternal reality, meaning it's always been and it will always be, this material universe that we live in. And in that sense, one of the things that defines its characteristics is circularity, that it moves in cycles. And so when we think about burning off karma, it's a lot of the times the image that comes to mind is like a flower or let's say a weed. That makes more sense because people always want to get rid of karma. It's like, I get rid of the weed from my garden. Well, my wife would hate hearing me say that because she's, an herbalist and weeds have great use, but as medicine. But in any way, let's say you're trying to burn a weed and you want to get down to the roots, or get the, I forget what they call it here, Roundup. It kills it down to the roots. You know what I mean? And so the roots, we get this sense that there is an origin in time and we have to sort of burn down to that origin in order to like eliminate karma. So you'll hear people say things in modern sort of new age astrology, which tends to adopt this view that there's somehow an origin or root of karma in time, which is actually coming from the Christian idea of original sin. It's really picking up on that idea that we were created at one point in time, and that there's an origination of our sin, or of our somehow being misaligned. But in Indian astrology, it's actually, there's no beginning to it, right? So you can't ever burn it off. There's no way in which you can ever, through work, through effort, through action, that you can ever sort of, get to the bottom of things. Oh, go
Yeah, I
ahead.
just want to say that I feel like that's really counterintuitive for a lot of us, because I feel like we're so used to being able to have a lot of control over what's going on. So even if it's like original sin, it's like, yeah, if those kids in the Garden of Eden didn't mess around with the apples, we wouldn't have to be paying for this. And
Yeah.
how can I rectify that in this life? But thinking about it as this anadi, this circle, these cycles, it's a lot less, I feel less judged or blamed for it in a way.
Yeah, exactly. That's a really great point. Yeah, I mean, we try to take up this, we kind of try to, it's a very, again, it's very like Christian, like the church fathers and their ideas about sin and stuff like that. And, the Indian tradition is like, look, you're not going to burn it. You're just not going to get to the bottom of it. That doesn't mean you can't, in a sense, burn off. There is an experience that we have of cycles, seasons, patterns coming to their natural dissolution, and we can change them. And sometimes there's a sense of burning off patterns or burning off certain kinds of habits or behaviors that they change through work, just like you can burn off fat, right? Like, so there is a sense in which that's true, but there's also a sense in which it's never ending if it's aimed toward eternal happiness. So you can't ever, because this world is always going to keep generating new experiences, new entanglements, new fruits, new flowers, new root systems. It's like trying to prune the Amazon. You know what I mean? But there might be some sense in which there's a degree of control. But does that make sense so far?
Yeah, it sounds kind of bleak though.
Well,
Like, is there nothing we can do to at
yeah,
least ease the effects of karma? Or
yeah. Well, that's the thing, is that first we have to understand the mistaken approach that we take to karma, to dealing with, the feeling that I can't dig myself out of the hole of challenges, stress, unhappiness. Like, how do I ever just reach a place where I feel fulfilled and live in that space? And the first answer is, you don't get it through trying to manipulate karma, which is what we're doing when we're trying to burn it off. Is really, we're just playing in our own poop. That's the basic idea. So there's this common idea in birth that people look at birth charts, like a modern astrological approach to looking at birth charts, that'll say there's something in your chart that you have to do, some karma you have to complete, or that you have to burn off, or some pattern that needs shifting or something like that. And this is also not rooted in traditional view of karma, right? So in a sense, the approach to like trying to find spiritual happiness through manipulation of karma, like, well, let me just go get better at this, or I kind of was like not so good at this in a past lifetime, and let me go get better at this in this lifetime, and kind of, I've got this hard thing over there, and I need to really work on that so that this area of my life isn't so challenging. And all of that is essentially trying to, it's like walking around in a gym, thinking that if we just point to and describe all of the different equipment in the gym, that will change our physique. We actually have to participate in the burning off of karma, for one thing, which we very, very rarely ever do by simply trying to manipulate it by getting different results. The actual use of the equipment comes from spiritual practice, right? You have to give some, you have to kind of put some fuel on the fire. You have to actually use the equipment. And for most ancient seers in this karmic tradition from India anyway, that means a spiritual practice every day. So you're going to have like every single day, not just like, oh, I went through a 21-day yoga challenge or something, and I posted my waistline coming down and my smoothies on Instagram or something like that. It's got to be like, no, for decades of our life, for as much of our effort and determination as we can muster, there's a daily practice of prayer. There's a daily practice of meditation or some mindfulness practices or whatever. Because if we try to approach the awakening of the eternal spirit soul purely through playing around in karma, through manipulating and things like that, it's like, yeah, that'll work, it's not that experience in the material world doesn't teach us and doesn't help us learn and grow. But it's like, it's like the difference between, say the water washing down the side of a cliff over, eons. You know what I mean? Just slow. Experience is a very, very slow teacher. I mean, it's really, really slow. So sometimes it feels really fast, but it's still like, it's a very slow process to change our consciousness purely by engaging in material things. So typically, in order for that process to be, like, let's just say, for it to become more dynamic and for it to move along a little bit more quickly, for the change of consciousness to become more dynamic, we have to participate in it. We have to do something, which, again, that usually translates into not just one kind of spiritual practice. There are many, but there has to be kind of like an intentional spiritual practice. But, and I'll say this and then I'll shut up. There's the thing is that spiritual practice, while it will burn off karma, right, which can change our world and our life, and different patterns and behaviors can get better. We can become more virtuous, kind, patient, like all those, those qualities that you want that give greater happiness can start to appear in our lives, and circumstances in our life can change, and bad karma can burn off. Those are all byproducts of spiritual experience. But also, they're not the point of spiritual experience either, because the reason that those things are changing is because we're starting to become more self-illuminated. In other words, the joy and the satisfaction that we're looking for starts to be a matter of who we are and what we are, not what's happening around us. So, the spiritual practice kind of brings that out over a long period of time. It takes a long time of doing that every day. It's not just like a simple high you can get, from going to like a 3-hour, hot yoga class, and you just feel so high afterwards for a couple of minutes. We're talking about a really deep cultivation that has to happen over a long period of time. The byproduct of which is the karma can change, but you don't even really care so much, which is what gives you the strength to also see all events, whether good or bad, as conspiring to help that process, so that you're not even going to stress as much over the difficult events or see them as somehow, far less favorable to your spiritual life than the good ones. Sometimes, in fact, it'll be the complete reverse.
Okay, yeah, I really like a lot of what you're saying here, especially about this being a slow practice. It doesn't make me feel like, oh God, if you're not, spending your whole day in prayer, basically, then you're failing at this.
Yeah.
And I'm also just thinking about, again, like myself, but just also people in my life who, timing-wise, they haven't got that message. They haven't figured it out that that's the answer. And is that also part of our karma? Like the timing of when we get this message, does this mean that, if you figured this out, and you don't just believe in it, you're actually doing it, that you've just spent lifetimes working towards it up until this point? What does that mean?
Yeah, it's that's a really good question. I mean, so when we care so much about free will in astrology, we want to be like, well, I have the free will to change my karma. It's like, yeah, you've always had the free will to change your karma. Look where it's gotten you. It's gotten you into a bag of like, mixed results, some good, some bad for most people, right? So yeah, that's what your free will has gotten you. And that's what it'll probably continue to get you. Some good, really good stuff, some really challenging stuff. For most of us, it's mixed. So for ancient, mystics, free will is not defined by that. That's not free will. That's actually conditioned will. That's will conditioned by our attachments and aversions to material outcomes. Real free will can't be recognized until you start recognizing who you are in relationship to the choices that you make as a conditioned being. How do you even get there? Well, it doesn't happen unless you sit down and start reflecting. So it happens very, very gradually. It's like the soul at some point sits down and goes, am I really free? Where is this really coming from? Why am I here? It seems like life is always just kind of a series of like good and bad stuff alternating all the time. When the soul just starts to reflect on that, sometimes in really small moments, like could be on a smoke break while someone's at work. It could, you know what I mean? Like it could be in a conversation at the bar. It doesn't have to be, that they're climbing up the mountain to see, the sage or whatever. But these small moments start to accumulate, and it's those moments of reflection where the reflector, the one reflecting, the spirit soul, is starting to appear, because it's that being that's doing the questioning. And then when we start to realize, that's actually who I am, then that's when free will starts to actually emerge. And then as that emerges, typically someone says, this is what I need to cultivate, this being inside of me, bringing it out, awakening it, tending to it, letting it be the source of my sense of identity and happiness and peace, etc. When people start to realize that, then gradually again, they take up practices. So I'm joking about the 21-day Instagram yoga challenge only because there's so much arrogance surrounding it, right? But it is a positive thing if people are doing anything like that. It's a positive thing if people are meditating or doing any kind of yoga or any kind of, reflection upon themselves. It's all positive, and it has this accumulative effect. And the Shastras are also really clear in the yogic tradition that there's no rush. There's an infinite amount of patience. There's no rush for us to be in. Experience is our guide and our teacher, so it's not to be renounced, right? It's not like you go, oh, I have a birth chart and all these experiences, I should just be praying and screw everything in my birth chart. No, the experiences will teach you, but you'll be moving at a snail's pace if you think that your spiritual enlightenment is only going to happen through experience in the material sense. It's, the conscious awakening that has to be added to it. But it's totally okay if it takes people a while to start cultivating that.
Yeah. And like you said, we kind of need these like gateway drugs. So however you get there, it's okay. So one thing that I feel like there might be some people thinking is, we have, birth charts are great, astrology is great for looking at very specific things, maybe patterns that we're dealing with. I mean, this is something that, like modern astrology can also do this. Just what are those annoying patterns that I keep going through? And I feel like, and maybe this is part of like the material conditioning, we want solutions that feel really like specifically matched to those patterns. Like if I have a issue with Mars, I want a Mars-based solution.
Mars-based solution.
So then to say, well, actually, no, there's just this simple spiritual practice and you just have to do this, and that's your solution for everything. It feels hard. I feel like we could try to complicate it. But yeah, what would you say to that?
Yeah, people are making it too hard. I mean, there's not just one simple spiritual practice. Obviously, there's many spiritual practices, but it's like we're not going to get anywhere very quickly if we don't see that there's basically one problem and there's one solution. The basic problem is thinking that I'm something other than what I am, and the basic solution is cultivating and awakening to who I really am. And so for example, when people are like, there's a Mars problem and I need a Mars solution. No, the Mars problem is symptomatic of a deeper problem. And the deeper problem is not knowing who I am, not residing in who I am, not being fulfilled by who I am, by what I am in relation to my divine source. I'm a spirit soul. And then, when I know that people are like, people will feel like anything that's that simple, sometimes people will, they'll feel like, well, it lacks variety. You know what I mean? And like, I need variety. Like, I want to play with Mars. I want to play with this. I want to play with that. Well, it's not, having a spirit. In other words, let's put it this way. See, if you have a Mars problem, what we're saying is essentially, are you sitting down and are you meditating every single day, for example, or chanting practice for me every day? If you're chanting every day for, 30, 60, in my case now, it's built up to where my practice is like 90 minutes a day. If you're just sitting in self-reflective space for that long every single day as a practice, it's really hard to gain weight if you're working out 2 hours a day. You know what I mean? It's really hard to, it's really hard spiritually to not make advancement and gain insight on anything if you're doing something like that every day, whatever it may be. Practices of ecstasy were many in the ancient world. So I'm not saying there's just one, but it's just the everydayness of it. It's the consistency of it. It's the commitment and devotion of it, that if you have that, you don't need to run around looking for, and I don't mean this to be trash talking anyone or anything, but we don't We don't need to be running around looking for a new myth, a new asteroid, a new aspect, a new, remedy, a new gemstone, a new blah, blah, blah. It's like all of these things. And most of it stems from people not doing the most basic thing that they need to do, which is to just sit and get still and talk to their inner spirit, listen, talk to God, talk to the universe, but do it intentionally every day in some way. Enter into communion with your inner self every day. I feel like if people do that, then even the question about burning off karma starts to make sense, because you're like, when you sit every day and if you sit with that question, how do I burn off karma? Da, 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 and you feel the anxiety behind the question of how do I burn off karma, or what in my birth chart do I need to do, or blah, blah, blah. So just, like sit for an hour near a stream with those questions and watch them fade into the stream. That's the answer. You know what I mean? And that you can cultivate this deep, abiding sense of trust in who you are as everything is, moving in this world. It's a lot easier to deal with than the obsessing over problems and broken things and solutions and fixing things, because that's the anadi. That's the thing that's never ending.
Yeah, always looking for the new thing. I think we get sucked into that. So one thing that I was just kind of thinking about there was, I made a note. Yeah, so one thing that you say a lot in your videos is, asking the question, what can I learn from this? And I'm wondering if that's one way to sort of make sense of like a particular transit. Again, getting kind of specific about our personal lives and these charts that we're kind of dealing with.
Practical help.
What's that?
So we need to make it a little bit practical for people who are sitting there with their birth charts. I'm telling them to go. Yeah, I'm like, go sit by a stream.
Like, that's not always going to be the solution. And I'm just wondering about like how these questions, these specifics, can actually still lead us to that, but they'll all do it in their own way, maybe.
Well, yeah, I don't think they lead us anywhere unless we're sitting by the stream, whatever the stream is. First of all, that's my first answer, and I'm sticking to it. But second of all, if you are going to look at an astrology, at the chart, it's like, knowing which planet you're dealing with, knowing what kind of season of life you're going through, etc., that helps you to just be cognizant of the presence of a God, of the presence of divinity, of, it's like your life can become like a moving piece of artwork. So that helps you appreciate it from a more reflective position. It helps you relate to what's happening from a position other than, oh my God, is it what I want, or is it what I don't want? Is it getting me towards happiness? Is it pushing me away from happiness? The ability of astrology to help us reflect upon what's happening and appreciate it, to see the artfulness, to see the mythos, to see the archetypal in it. It doesn't really matter what we accomplish as much as it helps us reflect upon it actively as it's happening. But the second thing is also related, which is that if you're actively reflecting in this way, an experience, as I said earlier, is a teacher. Like our experience, like the Shastras tell us in the yogic tradition, that our experiences are like cosmic sensitivity training. Every single karmic experience that we have is offering us insight, is offering us insight that can help us grow and evolve spiritually. So it's like that's built in. We still have to choose to respond to that. It's like instruction, but we have to receive it. It's like grace or mercy, but we have to receive it. So if we are in the midst of astrological experiences, reflecting upon them, appreciating them, and also holding out our hands and being like, help me to receive the lesson, the insight, like that from this experience. And then we take that process into our daily meditation. Oftentimes the daily meditation, like little light bulbs will just be going off like that. And the light bulbs will be like, this is why this is happening. This is how you've participated in this, or this is how you can make a shift or a change or whatever. So they become like little treasure chests full of things, but that can't happen unless we're also putting ourselves in the space near the river again to like receive those insights.
Yeah. And I'm just wondering if like on the flip side of that, we can be going through the motions of the spiritual practice, but like in day-to-day life, we could actually be acting like a bit of a dick, and I'm just wondering if the transits can speak to us just as much as they can speak better than like a bad spiritual practice. Like I've definitely sat through meditations myself and been like, I've just been thinking about my breakfast.
Yeah.
And that's not really very spiritual. So
Yeah.
whereas I've looked at a transit and it's taught me something really wise about, you know, what I need to be actually working on.
Yeah, yeah, that's a great point, right? Because yeah, I mean, there's this, you know, the verse that I think about from the Bible sometimes, which you know, is Jesus talking about prayer. Jesus was like, you know, go into the private. I think that one of the things that is it's really important is that our spiritual practices be something that it's deeply private and deeply personal. And so yeah, it's because, and if it stays that way, that's also over a long period of time. I think that's really helpful, because it can get kind of, you know, it can get sort of hypocritical. There's lots of people who have nice looking bodies that look fit and well, but, you know, are just rotten on the inside. So same thing can be true for a spiritual practice. I do think that, you know, reflecting upon astrological transits, you know, can definitely deliver insight. I think how does one reflect on a transit? You know, to me, there's basically two ways. One is with friends, you know, with teachers or friends, community that you trust, where you can like reflect in kind of a communal, participatory way, which is what we do, you know, on this YouTube channel a lot. We just reflect on the transits and what's happening and share stories. And that's one way that the insights are delivered. And then the other would be, you know, individually. And I guess what I'm saying is that I think it's hard to actually reflect on astrological transits if we're just like glued to our phone 24/7 and just kind of like in the stream of like, you know, just head spinning. So I think to reflect on it, what I want to say is that reflecting on an astrological transit can be like a meditation where you can just like, okay, let me just, sometimes you could do it even just like a vision board, or, you know, there could be a creative artistic way of engaging with it. I tend to like, you know, walks. I like my meditation and so forth. But however a person reflects, I'm just saying, make sure that it's something other than like, you know, a 14-page long Facebook debate about the meaning of your transit or something like that. Because it's got to have I think it has to have that kind of private quality. And the thing that I react against or that I get frustrated with is astrology that's only ever happening in the sort of reactive cyberspace.
Yeah, for me, it's like journaling about, well, my life in general, but also matching that up to transits, which I recommend to people just because it's really shown me a lot about, like, as at the time of recording, Jupiter is retrograde, and I was kind of reflecting back on how what that might have meant for me. And for me, I have linked that to a reversal in my own like spiritual practice. And I was like, obviously not every transit is going to be that descriptive and applicable maybe to something as specific as that. But for me, it was like a really practical like realization that I don't think I would have come to on my own. Like I knew it, but it wasn't real until I saw it and actually made that time to reflect.
So there's an intellectual component, like, you know, you knew like what Jupiter meant, you were tracking the retrograde. So there's this kind of like technical intellectual side of the tracking. But then just to kind of pull that out a little bit. So when you had this realization, like, how did it come? And then like, how did you crystallize it? Or like, what was your process?
So I was just, you know, looking back through my journal, I just remember that was a particular time where things in my life changed a bit. And then the sort of conclusion was, oh yeah, well, you know, I can do something about this. And,
I see. Okay.
And like looking ahead, oh, right, you know, Jupiter will be direct soon, and not to like, oh, I'll only change when that happens, but also just acknowledging general timing. Mm-hmm. And maybe that's also a question. It's like, can our chart also reflect our own, I won't say like progress, but you know, we might look at the ninth house, but I've got a feeling you're going to be like, no, it's not just the ninth house.
Yeah, I'm so predictable. Yeah, I mean, no, I mean, you can, I think this is what I always say. I'm like, do you journal every day, Kat?
Yes, pretty much.
Okay. So that would you consider that to be like a spiritual practice for your life?
Yeah. Yeah, in a way. Yeah.
Right. I mean, to me, journaling would be a place of self-reflection, a place of inner dialogue, a place of awakening the inner self in relation to the things happening in your life, I think journaling is one really great way to do it. So I would call that a spiritual practice, as long as it's something that's not like, oh, I journaled for a week and then 2 years later, you know what I mean? So my point is that it is the journaling that allowed for you to receive the wisdom of that transit.
Interesting.
Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah.
And it's not the transit itself. It's not the birth chart itself. It's what you did to your consciousness in relation to being a student of astrology, obviously, that allowed for that insight to crystallize, and your relationship with astrology as a spiritual practice to deepen. So astrology can be a spiritual practice, yes, but it doesn't really work unless astrology is being done in a spiritual manner, which usually means that there's like journaling, or there's some active way. I mean, sometimes for people, again, like maybe the view that I have the most animosity toward is when it's basically just online gossip.
Yeah.
And to me, it's like that's the most base form of it, because there has to be a way of it entering into the private sphere, which is why I mentioned that verse about Jesus being like, yeah, the hypocrites out on the street, blah, blah, blah. It's fine. They're progressing, but, go in the secret, have this quiet space, this kind of inner sanctum.
Yeah, it's not about wearing a zodiac t-shirt. Nothing against those. Those are cool, but
Yeah.
It's not just about that.
Yeah, I'm trying to be careful because I'm sure I sound like such a jerk when I'm saying some of these things, but it's really like, again, so like back to your question about like, where can you see the progress in the chart? The thing is that if you are doing the journaling like you just mentioned, or whatever your practice is, then of course you can see the progress, because everything is progress, because everything is delivering the insight to you. All the transits, all the good, all the bad. And so everything looks like it's progressing. The mistake is to then jump on the conspiracy bandwagon and try to create some kind of program or stereotyped system or model or, specs that are like, yeah, and then you can see it mapped out. And when Jupiter moves here, you moved up to level 8. And like, that's crap. All of that stuff is crap. The simple thing is that everything is conspiring to help you grow and evolve. And therefore everything in the birth chart will appear to be doing so, as long as you're doing that journaling, or as long as you're doing that praying, or whatever the case might be. And that's how ancient astrologers practiced. That's literally how they practiced.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I hope this isn't an annoying like follow-up, but I do kind of question whether there's something in my chart that might make me more prone to a journaling practice versus another spiritual practice.
Well, that's totally legitimate, because that's like religious psychology, right? Like,
interesting. I feel like that's like a thing that somebody's going to like copyright now.
Right. I mean, like seriously, like that's like, yes, you can look at that in a birth chart. You can see what kind of, because that boils down. I mean, this is, my opinion about religious experience over, years and having lots of different experiences in different traditions and cultures around the world, India, South America, Protestant Christianity, blah, 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 is that, we approach different practices because the practices they're all taking us to the same communion with the same source. But the practice looks different depending on our psychology, depending on our background, depending on our socioeconomic status, depending on our, a culture we were raised in, blah, blah, blah. So on that level, if people want to say what type of spiritual activities or what type of practice or religious or spiritual disposition might I have, and could I gain insight on that in order to help me develop a practice? Yes, that's totally within the bounds of a birth chart. It's just that the birth chart itself isn't like, it's not gonna, to me, it's the birth chart is not here to say, well, your north node is in the 10th house, your south node is in the 4th, so you better get rid of family attachment and go make a name for yourself in the world. Go own your power, girl. You know what I mean? Like that kind of thing. So because, well, anyway, I won't go into that. That's a whole can of worms, but that's what I'm saying when I say it's like that the progress isn't in the chart. It's in your consciousness.
And it's our free will, like for somebody to turn that journaling into a spiritual practice versus a I don't know what else that would be. Like it might just be a blog about my life. I don't know. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's hard to like, but again, like one of the things that is encouraging to me is that in the Bhakti yoga, wisdom literature, it's very clear that like it's the intention that matters behind it. Like it's not, so if I'm trying to grow closer to my spiritual center, What really matters is that I'm sitting there going, I'm doing this because I'm trying to grow as a person, because I'm trying to reflect and maybe purify myself, or my motives, or my intentions, or my relations in the world, or my sense of service to others and service to God. If we're sitting down and we're sitting down to reflect, but we're only reflecting from the standpoint of our entanglement in our ego, well, that's not the same kind of journaling, is what I guess what we would say. But still, in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, if people offer me a leaf, a fruit, a flower, or some water, I'm totally satisfied. I think that the universe, our source, God, however we want to call it, is deeply moved and reciprocates with us if it's even just the smallest spark of a true intention to grow spiritually. So I don't think we have to be like, we're not expected to be saints, overnight or something like that. It's nothing like that.
That's very encouraging, and I hope that people listening are as encouraged as I've been. So yeah, I think that's all I've got. Thank you.
Okay, this is a great talk, and I hope that everyone enjoyed it. These questions are, when I give these answers, these are answers that I've understood from reading Shastra and the commitment of my path on the yogic path, from my gurus and from my teachers. I don't feel like I've realized any of the conclusions of these teachings at all. But just kind of reporting on what I've heard the best I can. So thanks for providing some good questions, Kat, and thanks for all of you for providing them in the first place. So we will be back with more, and I hope in the meantime you have a great time. Make sure you check out Kat's program, thecreativeintrovert.com. All right, take it easy, everyone. Bye.